Not following a process leads to random results, waste of time and resources. Welcome back everyone, this is Creative Instruct and my name is Vlad. I'm a UX UI designer and mentor within the community. Glad to have you on this channel because today we're gonna talk about two processes I trust to follow as a designer. Number one is design thinking, an approach to solving complex problems, oftentimes hard to spot. And number two is lean UX for fast release cycles. You'll learn what's the difference between them, what do they actually refer to, and by the end of the video, we're gonna answer the question, can they coexist or do they exclude each other? All this after the short intro. Process will be a series of steps or actions one will take in order to accomplish a result. As a basic example, think of preparing a delicious meal. Oftentimes, if you break it down, you'll realize that you're taking similar steps. Number one, finding a recipe. You might want to talk with your mother, ask your friends, go out there on the internet or open a cookbook. Basically, you're doing some sort of research. Number two, gathering the ingredients. You start to narrow it down. Number three, making the composition. Number four, the cooking process where you actually bake it or fry it, boil it. And fifth, serving it. Yeah, you need to taste it, ideally share it and see if it was as good as you thought it is. Easy enough, no? Well, design thinking is a process in 5 steps, though it sounds like a complex framework which helps us innovate, come up with new ideas, solutions and products. You'll see that if you understand those steps and follow them, it's not that difficult. Let's start by looking at the first step, and for that I'm going to move to the whiteboard. I know I said 5 steps. Important to also remember what happens at each step. Number one, it's empathize. And here you're going to carry out research, this time not for a food recipe, but on the target group, the people that you want to solve the problem for. Look inside and outside your organization. Feel free to talk with managers, colleagues from other departments, subject matter experts, and customers. You want to schedule interviews, carry out surveys. You act as a detective. You're collecting and recording data, which later on you're going to transform into insights. Those will help you move to the second step, which is called define. In the second step, you're trying to see who you're solving the problem for and what do they want and need. You're going to narrow down the data, create profiles, help yourself with empathy maps, and very important, make the problem statements. If the problem statement is too broad, it's going to be hard for you and your team to solve it. If it's too narrow, it doesn't leave room for creativity. Let's see an example of a broad problem statement. Let's say many students fail their national exams. As you can see, we don't know a lot about who are they. There can be so many reasons for which they fail. An example of a narrow problem statement: students cannot access their profile page on the faculty website. Well, something might have happened with the login script, or the login section is hard to find. Then maybe oftentimes they forget their credentials and it's hard to retrieve those. A good example of a problem statement will be from the point of view of the user. As a student in my final year, I want to remember what I learned in the previous years in order to score enough points on my exams. We know that those are seniors. We know that they want to have an easy way to remember what they studied in the previous years, and we have the why, in order for them to pass the exams. Once you have the problem statements, move to the third step, which is ideate. In ideate, use pencil and paper, sketch, brainstorm, mind map, debate with your team, create storyboards. Those help you easily communicate the ideas. You want to generate as many ideas as possible, discard some of them. Only the best should make it in the fourth phase, called prototype. Now it's time to open your favorite tool for creating the UI. Start with low fidelity, which are also called wireframes. Then move with those into high fidelity and make them in a nice prototype. The prototype is what's going to move you to the next phase, the testing phase. Time to get some reactions and comments from people that might use your solution. In the end, you're not building it for yourself, but for those that need it. User testing, it's a way to see if they actually like it and understand it. usability testing, if they manage to successfully accomplish their goals, or do they get stuck somewhere in the middle. If problems are revealed, don't be afraid to move back and refine the result. There are also other types of testing, remote or in person. Those are based on location, moderated and unmoderated. Unmoderated tests will be those where the presence of the researcher or the UXer is not needed, data being collected at the end. That's design thinking in a nutshell, guys. Like, subscribe, and let's move to the second process, which is Lean UX. I have to be honest now. Frequently I find myself in the Lean UX, and if you're like me, you might deal with one of the following working scenarios. Number one, you're either part of an agile team, a cross-functional team, delivering a new improvement, a new feature to an existing product every other 2 or 3 weeks. Of course, according to a roadmap or a backlog prioritized. Or number two, you might work on a new business initiative, a pilot, which has a limited set of features. In that case, if we refer back to our cooking example, you don't have the whole day to prep a delicious meal, so you need to do something fast but still good enough to be enjoyable when you eat it. There are only 3 steps, and those are think, make, and check. Easy to remember, or if you prefer, learn, build, and measure. Less important it's how those are called, more important it's what happens at each step. Let's start with the first one. In the think phase, you're gonna do some kind of research. You're gonna gather some available data for you and your team, so check your analytics, talk with business operations, and organize a meeting, brainstorm, and try to come up with a hypothesis. The hypothesis needs to contain 4 key elements. One is the feature that you're going to build. Second is the users that you want to address with your feature. 3, the outcome you're after. And 4, how you're going to measure, how you're going to recognize success. To give you an example, let's say we believe that by creating interactive quizzes for our students, chances are that they will increase their scores in the final exams. We'll know it's true when the scores increase by 10% compared with the previous session. The feature is the quizzes. The users are the students that need to prepare for their exams. The outcome is to help them increase their score. We'll need to measure, and if we see an increase, we can say that it was indeed a success. Second phase, once you have the hypothesis, you need to start to execute. Make it happen. Think about sketching, wireframing, prototyping, coding even. Finalize this as soon as possible, and then move to the third step, which is check. You're gonna release the new feature and start measuring. Deploy some heat maps, carry out A/B testing, see if it was what you expected or if it needs improvement. Otherwise, you might need to drop it entirely and start over. But that's the nice part of the Lean UX. It allows you to fail. To wrap it up, Lean UX doesn't exclude design thinking, but it adapts it to the constraints of an agile working environment. Lean UX isn't that difficult, but it will require a bit more experience from the designer in order to be able to communicate with the team and choose the best tools for the tasks he needs to solve. I would encourage beginners, start with the design thinking, get exposed to the whole project from start to end, and then adapt to other ways of working. Thank you for staying until the end of the video, and do leave a comment, tell me about what process you follow, share and subscribe. I'll see you in the next video where we're gonna talk about UX research.